year respected. Expert level information, entertainment, education. Rev Yearwood got you covered as you hit your destination. Climate rules everything around me. Dream. For those who lost focus, close your eyes and just dream. Open your third eye, now the world is your office. Coolest show you know is the Hip Hop Caucus.
Everybody, this is Rev Yearwood here on The Coolest Show, and welcome back. We have an exciting conversation for you. I have with me, I love to have attorneys on the show because they definitely break it down, and definitely attorneys from our community, definitely from Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities, because they understand also justice. And so with me, I have with me Daniel Cordalis. Daniel, my brother, how are you?
I'm good, man. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well, welcome to The Coolest Show. I want to get right to it and everything we need to talk about regarding the Colorado River, your community, how the drought, we have so many different things to get to. But for folks who don't know, who is Daniel Cordalis?
Oh, it's a good question. Probably very few people actually know. So thanks for asking. My name is Daniel Cordalis. I'm a member of the Navajo Nation. I grew up in kind of rural Southwest Colorado, and at this point in my life, I'm an attorney. I work for the Native American Rights Fund, a nonprofit legal defense fund that serves Indian country, whether it's tribal individuals, tribal governments, or other tribal organizations. And I focus my work on natural resources, primarily water, but also very interested in kind of how tribes can be involved in support of a better land management and be involved to protect our tribal resources.
Something, Daniel, I was in Boulder. I love Boulder. That's probably something people always say when they say that sentence. They love Boulder.
Yeah.
It is truly beautiful. The mayor, who was in Boulder for quite some time, she actually picked me up from the Denver airport and then moved me. But what was striking to me was that definitely you can see the power of the land and the community, particularly the indigenous community. But you also can see those who are there now. There's a lot of folks who are there from very wealthy communities. So with that kind of, parallel reality going on, who would you say is your community?
I think you're right. I mean, I don't know when you've been. I've been here off and on the last 20 plus years, and it's changed incredibly. Having grown up in Colorado, the whole state's changed a lot, right? It's a lot of money that's come in, and it's really changed the feel of like what the state was, in the 90s, the 80s, and even the early 2000s, with the influx of money kind of just got to be a little bit more like a fancy city, right? Rather than kind of having those kind of mom and pop local long-term stores. Some of like the local stores got pushed out for galleries and real estate places. That's all, whatever that is. That happens when money kind of comes in. My community, is and continues to be just whatever tribal people I can find, and also the people who kind of love kind of this idea of protecting anybody's, right? Anybody's relationship to the earth, and they want to protect that, and they want to be, supportive of like the movement to keep humans as a part of the environment, not something separate, not something that we see as being, turning on and turning off, but that's, our relationship with the earth is kind of the most important one we have, right? It's who we are. It's where we came from. It's where we're going to go back to. It's we call it Mother Earth for a reason, right? And kind of where that relationship is at the heart of like what drives my feelings towards like, my community, right? And the people that kind of can share love and respect in that sort of way.
That's I think people listening right now, I think they may not understand, as I can hear in your voice, just the love of how you actually how you don't separate your community and the land. It's all together. They feed one another. They it's almost there's a love relationship between the land and the people, and that's such a powerful, respectful, honoring position that I wish that more people would have. For people who don't know, what is the Native American Rights Fund, and what does your day to day look like as an attorney there?
Yeah. So Native American Rights Fund, we're a law firm. Right? At our core, we're a law firm. We're a nonprofit law firm. We are 54 years old. So 1970, basically, out of this, there was a kind of a national war on poverty effort, and there were a lot of legal services that were kind of being supported by the federal government and major foundations to support low-income people and marginalized people. And we didn't have a centralized place that supported Native American people. And so NARF was, with the acronym NARF, was created with that in mind. Like we need a place to help these help the folks, right? And so NARF was created back then, and then it was came out of a project out of California, and realized that to be a more centralized place to support Indian country, particularly in the West where the major land bases are, we needed to be a little bit of a more central place, and Colorado and Denver and Boulder were the top of the list. So that's how we ended up in Boulder at the time. And so, as an organization, we handled and to help develop the field of federal Indian law, what the name of it is, since the 70s, and trying to bring at the beginning, we're talking about these major cases, basically to establish the rights of tribal nations to continue existing as tribal nations, right? And maintaining the kind of the special relationship we had with the federal government, and making sure that states didn't infringe and impinge on tribes' rights too much. We're talking about fishing rights that were so important for tribal members, kind of cultural rights to be in their places, in their traditional and sacred places that they were kind of being excluded from for much of the 1900s, and fighting with the states, fighting with the federal government about the continued ability to maintain cultural practices. And so there's a lot of law that goes into enforcing treaties, right? The obligations that the United States entered into these bilateral negotiations in the 1800s. And NARF's been at the center of a lot of that, and it's kind of helped been the backbone legal support for tribal nations for the last 55 years.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really fantastic. And we do basically every kind of work that tribal governments need. We were a fairly small staff. We probably have like 25-ish lawyers. There's a lot of voting rights work that is being done, because that's just so important to be able to vote, right? To be a participate in democracy. I mean, Native American people weren't allowed to vote until the 1924, right? I mean, that wasn't even. It was illegal. It's crazy. And even now, in some states, they are trying to restrict the ability of Native people to vote by saying, "Oh, well, if you don't have a physical street address, then you can't come and vote in these states." Like, well, these tribal people, they live in the middle of some of these reservations. There are no street addresses out there, and so they're being turned away at the ballots, right? And they couldn't vote. So a lot of our work's like, no, that's illegal, and we are doing an incredible job at kind of turning that around. We work in education, we work in child welfare, we work in natural resources and water. That's what I do mostly, and we help kind of coordinate just across the country on Supreme Court issues, and kind of being the central kind of unifying force between tribes, private practice. There's a lot of law firms that do this work too, government. So we kind of view ourselves as being kind of one of these central pieces to help organize. So,
wow.
And so, yeah.
No, and I would say, one thing I always try to say is, demonstration without litigation leads to frustration. If you don't, if you're not understanding how litigation is a key part of movement building, and what it means, it's such an important asset to what we
Yeah.
need to do. And the time frame you gave, this hit me hard because I know the modern day environmental movement. I always say it's right around that time frame between 1968 and 1972
Yeah.
was the creation of the modern day environmental movement, from the Aspen Institute to the League of Conservation Voters to NRDC, Earth Justice, you name it. It was probably created. Rainforest Action Network was created during that time. But at the same time, there were many other organizations like the Native American Rights Fund and others that were created during that same time. But what you
Yeah.
don't get is a lot of times you don't get the significance of the Black, Brown, Indigenous, and Native organizations that were created during that time frame. And I want to get to the work you're doing now, but just as you were reflecting,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts when you kind of look back, and I know there was the AIM movement going on. There's so much that was happening during that time frame. Why do you think, as an environmental movement, we became so siloed?
We as in who?
As in,
Like,
we. That's a great response. Yeah, we as a climate movement, as we are now moving forward. Why do you think, for instance, we didn't connect? Now we're doing better. We're
yeah.
doing better. But why do you think it took us 50 years or 40 years for us to connect these dots? What was it that was, or was it just the fact that just needed to happen that way?
I mean, let me see. Let me make sure I'm understanding the question, because I have answers queued up going different directions here.
No, definitely.
Are we thinking about just kind of that sphere of important things that was happening towards the end of like the civil rights and environmental era? They're all kind of headed off in like
women's rights, gay rights,
right?
the
All
Indian,
these things.
all these things are happening during that little time frame, including the creation of the organization you work for now.
Right. And now we're communicating and being able to work with each other and kind of create different results across areas, right? That's what we're thinking.
Exactly. Now we're saying that racial justice is climate justice. We're now saying we're now connecting things in 2024. But my question is just, from your standpoint, why do you think it took so long to get here?
Well, I think I'll speak to what I believe happened, at least from the Native American perspective inside. And I was an earth justice attorney too a while ago, so I think it's cool you called that out. So I think they're kind of, and our trajectories have been really interesting to kind of witness too, because they're an organization that of course focuses that they're the lawyers that bring environmental public interest, right?
That's right.
And
Earth is a good lawyer.
They're fantastic. They're fantastic lawyers, and
most definitely.
And so, whether it's enforcing environmental regulations, working on environmental justice, whatever it is, and the trajectory of the organization in the last 10 years has just skyrocketed. Because everyone, especially with the Trump administration coming in, and everyone having to go on defense. And the only way we're going to protect a lot of these environmental, gains that we've made is by doing it in court, probably. Because when the government is flailing around like it did in those 4 years, then we need people to keep the ship up. And that's we have to rely on the courts if we can't rely on Congress or the administration, right? But I think the last 10 years has been just such a phenomenal time for the inclusion of tribal interests and tribal rights. And I think it all happened from Standing Rock. I really do. That was the time. That was interesting because that was a case that came through when I was at Earth Justice. And when that request came in and we looked at it, we're like, oh, what cool. It's a good case. Never, I think, could we ever imagined it would have been what it is, right? What happened there? For for all the bad things that happened, of course, but all the positive things that kind of came from it, at least that were not focused on the case itself, but related to just the movement itself. I think that before that, a lot of people didn't understand tribal people and didn't trust tribal government. I think I saw that in a lot of NGO work that I had done. Conservation groups before Standing Rock were like, well, we're not really, we would love to work with the tribe. We're not sure it's the right thing for us. We're not sure we can give a grant to them. We think this is the right way to treat this land or this part of the forest because, we're basically, we don't trust you to take care of it, right? We think that you, tribe A, tribe B, might turn around and cut all the trees down. We think you might just start developing oil. We might think you might take the water out. We might, we just don't trust you, right? But I think at Standing Rock, there was like this visibility and this power that everyone saw. Like, these tribal people are like the real deal, right? I mean, what they have, what they're feeling at these moments of trying to protect the water and like the way they view themselves and how they're willing to put themselves on the line, their lives on the line for this resource, right? In the face of like the middle of a crazy like upper Midwest winter. I mean, there's no comparison. I don't know if anything like it's just so profound. And I think it caught people that way. And they're like, this is just phenomenal. Like these, like it just hit them, right? There's something that just hits people. And I think it did that. And I think what the response has been, like, well, tribal people, they're for real. They're part of this. They're visible. Right. I think it brought visibility in a way that we haven't had in a lot of like across the country. And I think that the whole movement saw the power too that tribes that we can wield through treaties, through our rights, like and how we can do things, and we're fighting for these same resources kind of together, and that. We should all be partners, right? We shouldn't be afraid of tribes doing something bad or wrong, at least in their eyes, right? And tribes still can do what they need to do, and that's their business. But for this kind of like environmental movement, I think they're going to realize that tribes are an incredible partner, and if you can work with tribes and advocate on the same things towards the same goals, you're going to get a lot farther. And tribes are just an incredible source of power, and if tribe can lead and you can support the tribe leading, then you might get some great results out of that too. And so there's been a lot of bridge building in the last 10 years. There's also been a lot of hard conversations and a lot of hurt that tribes have had to kind of try to work back from, because we've kind of been ignored and kind of been some of those rights have been trampled on by a lot of people.
Daniel, that was beautiful. Thank you for that, man.
Thank you.
And I just I'm hearing echoing in my head, Minnie Wachoni, just water is life. And that actually kind of is what we want to talk about today, the Colorado River and the Colorado River Basin, which supplies drinking water for 40 million people in Colorado, Wyoming, New Mexico, Utah, Nevada, Arizona, California, and 2 states in Mexico. It's a crucial resource for 30 tribal nations, fuels hydropower in 8 states, and supports agriculture communities. But the river has lost 10 tons of gallons of water since 2000 from what people are calling a mega drought. And this has led to the first federally declared water shortage, and it being named the most endangered river in the United States. So Daniel, what significance does the Colorado River have to you and those you're in community with?
Yeah, I mean, the river and the basin itself is my home, right? It's where not only do I, as a Navajo person, we're Navajo reservations basically at the center of the Colorado River Basin, right in the middle. If you looked at a map, you kind of see that. It takes up like 10% of the land of the basin too. The landscape itself, I think about the Colorado River and I just, close my eyes for a second. I think about just what it is. And I can, imagine it going through the Grand Canyon, moving upstream through just these amazing red rock walls, sandstone, just you see it, you hear it, and you can kind of, you smell what it smells like. And that's, it's home, right? It's the place you love and the place you protect. And even up here up in Colorado, where we're at, I mean, we're not far away from that basin. We are 10 miles as the crow flies to the headwaters, and a place where we get to recreate and ski and hike and kind of be a part of the start of a lot of that headwaters. And so it's kind of it just has this feeling of just like protection, and like the whole world exists there.
Daniel, I see you getting emotional. Why is this making you emotional?
I just love thinking about it. It just feels good, right? I mean, you just kind of takes you to your place, and you just feel yourself there, and you feel yourself almost just like hovering above it, right? And you see your family there. You see like your friends, and just all your people, right? And that's where they've been, and I could and it's interesting because when I think about that, I think about my family, it's my mom's family who grew up on the Navajo reservation. She grew up in a very traditional sort of way, as long as they could, until you had to go to school, and they did that in a very good way. But it's as dry as can be out there. So the importance of the river for tribal people and all the tribal communities in the basin is very, it's practical, right? I mean, you also need water to live. And so, there's a lot of tribes. There's 30 tribes in the basin, and they each have their own needs, their own priorities, and their own kind of issues they're trying to fight towards. And it's a really tricky moment in the basin, like you're saying. I mean, this drought has been real. It's been going on for 20 years. When I was a graduate student, we were talking about it at the front end, and nobody was really taking it seriously yet. But in the last 5 years, it's been so bad that the federal government had to step in and kind of talk serious, right? Kind of had to be the grown-up in the room for a little bit, and things have changed a little bit in that regard.
How is pollution and the climate crisis impacting the Colorado River Basin?
I think the climate crisis is the major issue, right? I mean, we're losing winter precipitation, which is so important. I mean, like a couple of years ago, I think we had maybe 80% of a normal snowpack. Which doesn't sound terrible, right? But what ended up showing up in the river itself was about 50% of the annual flow, which is incredibly low. And having these successive years like this, it really creates really a dire situation for mostly the downstream users, right? The folks in California, the ones in Arizona, the big cities. All the big cities are down towards the bottom, right? Up here on the top of the basin is Colorado, Utah, Wyoming. I mean, yes, we use water up here, but not like the lower basin, right? And so down there, there's so much more infrastructure and people. Most of those 40 million people live down there and that rely on the water. Most of the agriculture is down there. And so it really puts a real significant threat to like how they use water, development, how they grow things, who grows things, how much it costs. But it also, it's also an opportunity, I think, for some of us who know a lot about water law and how we do water policy to say, hey, is this the right way for us to use water, or is it not? Should we be thinking about things? And a lot of that comes down to state government decisions, but there are things that we don't like to talk about in water law too much. because nobody likes the, they're hard conversations, but it's refreshing to me when we're actually able to talk about hard things in relation to water.
Let me actually jump down here a little bit. What is the Tribal Water Institute, and how does the Native American Rights Fund help tribal nations defend their water rights?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm the lead attorney on what we call the Native American Rights Fund, the Tribal Water Institute. It's a new project we created over the last year to basically bring like a strong focus and interest and develop capacity around tribal water rights, tribal water issues. One of the things that I've noticed, whether it's been in my own practice as a tribal attorney, which I was a federal government attorney, and then working with like conservation groups, we just don't have enough attorneys that know tribal water rights very well.
Wow.
And it's kind of a niche area a little bit, and we're not generating these ideas and solutions to things at a pace that we probably should be doing, right? I think you probably feel like there's a lot of like think tank like organizations throughout the United States that focus on different issues, right? Whether it's environmental, a lot of social justice, a lot of there's energy, everything. But what we don't have is a lot of things like this that serve Indian country. And we certainly don't have anything that serves tribes on water, right? And so, we need to just create this. Like, but we can't wait for someone to do it. Let's just go and do it. So let's collaborate. Let's bring people together. Let's bring up all the experts we can bring to think about the policy solutions we need to help tribes deal with water issues. Let's also, because we're a law firm, let's train young attorneys to become water lawyers. So they can become water lawyers and they can go work for tribes or for organizations and they can be experts in this because we need more experts, right? So it's really this effort to develop expertise and capacity and a lot more collaboration around tribal water issues.
As you're talking, I'm thinking that, I know and have heard that there are some communities and some tribal nations that have been waiting 20, 30, 40 years to get access to clean water. How is that possible? Is that due to federal government's disregard of tribal sovereignty? Is it an infrastructure issue? How is that possible?
Yeah, well, I'll say they've been waiting longer than that because they've never had it, right? Ever, right? So just going back to my family's experience, we haul water, right? And so we have a water truck and we bring that in, and a lot of maybe homes out on Navajo. You might have indoor plumbing of some sort, but you got to get the water there to feed it, or you don't have indoor plumbing at all, and you just like are hauling water and kind of creating whatever you can. One of my earliest memories was being out there at my mom's place where she grew up, and my grandmother, who's very traditional Navajo woman who only ever spoke Navajo, and we had a big aluminum kind of, wasn't a bucket, but it was kind of like a container, and you basically pull out a ladle at a time of water. That's how you get your water, right? And that was it. That was all the water we all had. We had to share it. So that was the reality, and it's been a really difficult thing to figure out how to get tribes more water because it is an infrastructure thing, right? Because there's sometimes these communities and these houses are just dispersed across hundreds of square miles. Pipes are crazy expensive. And it's just like creating a domestic water supply where one never existed. But that was also what happened to all these other communities everywhere else, right? So I think there was actually a disregard of the way that a lot of communities were built up, that they just ignored tribal communities and tribal reservations. Like, well, tribes are there, they're probably used to whatever they're used to, so we're just going to develop things around them and fix the communities that were here. And I don't know if it was just not caring, or if it was just like not, which I didn't worry about it, or felt like maybe they were going to, dig one well for this tribe and that was all they were going to do, but not worry about infrastructure. So it's a significant problem, right? I mean, there's communities all over, tribal communities everywhere don't have clean water, right? There's no connected infrastructure because the funding has never been there. It's never been a priority. That's the thing. It's never been a priority to make water an accessible thing for every tribal citizen. It just hasn't been.
One of the things, you probably know my history. I've been around a lot of celebrities over the course of my career. 30 years, and they could be a unique batch. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They could be unique. And one thing, some of them, I think, a lot of them want to do right. So that's actually a blessing. But one of the things that came to my attention was particularly about how so many cities, such as Las Vegas, LA, San Diego, and Phoenix, rely on the Colorado River Basin, which you're talking about right now. And about 2 years ago, several celebrities made headlines after being fined for excessive water use during a severe drought, which included Sylvester Stallone, Kim and Kourtney Kardashian, our brother Kevin Hart, and so many more. They got a bunch of fines. They got fined, hundreds, thousands of dollars. But a lot of them folks, they make a few coins. So I'm not sure it's too hard for them to pay that dollar and those fines that they got. But what was found out is that more than 1,600 residents were using excessive amounts of water that was literally causing the drought and the problem we have today. So if you can speak to them, and you can speak to my crew of celebrity friends, how would you want to tell them that how does this impact communities and families who live along other parts of the river basin, not the ones that are washing their cars 2 times a day? But more importantly, how can technology, such as the water flow restrictors, reduce consumption?
Yeah, there's a couple things there, right? There's one is like your personal responsibility, which each of us has. It doesn't matter how much money we make, just to kind of do the right thing, right? That's something that kind of goes through everything you do in your life, right? I mean, you kind of there are things that are greater than us, and the things that are greater than a green lawn or a certain type of flower beds, and so there's a certain element to that. Either sometimes you care about that in a real way, or sometimes you don't. Right? You think about these as environmental connected problems, or you don't. I'm not saying they don't, but maybe that's a way for them to think about it next time, right? And all those cities use a lot of water, and I agree. A recent study that we've come up with we haven't come up with it, but it's come out, shows that 70 to 75% of the water in the Colorado River Basin is used basically to support cows.
Wow.
Whether it's alfalfa, mostly alfalfa, and whether it's domestic or international, or it's basically feed crops, right? So we're using a ton of water to support cows. So, I mean, to me, that was just shocking, right? I knew a lot of water went to ag. I knew it kind of just, yes, a lot of it's going to feed cows, but not that much, right? 70% of that water, of 14 million acre feet a year, is going to support hamburgers and steaks. That's crazy to me.
No, that is crazy. That's a lot. That's something else.
I know, and so to me, it's like, well, there's the problem for me. Like, how is it that we can incentivize, agriculture that gets to do kind of whatever it wants to do without real regard for the value of water in that sort of way? I mean, you compare however much water Kevin Hart was using versus like how much these cows are using. I mean, it doesn't compare at all in some way. So, for me, that's what's been rich in my mind lately. It's like, how do we incentivize good use of agricultural water that actually helps the public good and not just, whatever we're going to get, cheap burgers, right? That's a different thing. Technology is a big deal on that. I think, agriculture in that way, if agriculture is using 75 to 80% or plus of the water in any given water basin, how do we make sure that their use is as efficient as possible? I think a lot of farmers are trying to do the right thing, but it's all pretty new. They're going from a place where they would just like flood irrigate or use canals to now like these pretty high tech pieces of technology to support smart water use. And I think that's the way we need to go. And I think they can save a lot of water by doing so. And I think the policies and the equities need to be tipped in favor of them doing that. So maybe they use half as much water, but they get an additional benefit to do that, right? The problem with a lot of water is like you have this amount of water. If you only use part of it, you lose the other bit, and it's just gone. And so like, what's your incentive for doing something that saves water if you're going to lose the rest? There's kind of these weird, perverse incentives for being inefficient. And so we got to tighten that up quite a bit. So I think technology it's going to play an incredible role in this. And I'm really looking forward to a time when we can get it out on the ground everywhere.
No, me too. I got a few more questions, but I do want to make sure and lift up. It is in your household. It looks like it's a family affair of fighting the good fight. On our last 2 episodes here on the Coolest Show, we discussed fisheries in Alaska, detailing how the salmon there is a lifeline and an indicator of the climate crisis and the industry's impact on the surrounding ecosystem. However, the salmon crisis isn't just happening there. There's also been a decline in the salmon populations in California, and your wife, Amy Bowers Cordalis, is the protagonist in the recently released short documentary Undammed. We got a little that's a little sound thing there. Amy is a Yurok tribal attorney who has dedicated her life to oversee reversing the generations long destruction that has been wrought by the Klamath River dams. You made a cameo in the film and have worked to protect the Klamath River. But what is the relationship between hydropower and the Klamath and the Colorado River Basins? And how are the dams impacting the rivers and surrounding communities? And please know Amy's going to be listening to this, so make her proud.
Yeah, well, they're 2 very different rivers, right? I'll talk about the Klamath first. I mean, yeah, my wife's done just an amazing job, kind of. I think, as she would describe it, carrying the tradition of her family and their tribe into fighting for her river, right? And that's their everything. It's the ability to interact with the river and that ecosystem through fishing and just being a part of that river, right? And so when that river is getting unhealthy and those fish aren't doing well, I mean, that strikes to the very heart of them. And so it's been amazing to sit and watch alongside of her do her work, because she's she's unbeatable in that. And those dams are coming out this year. They're out by the end of this year. The Klamath River, 4 of them. They were hydro dams, but they really weren't generating much power. And the cost of them, both in terms of ecological destruction and the cost to basically allow the fish to move past them, was so high that the owners of them, Pacificor, Warren Buffett, right, ultimately said, this is a bad asset for us to hold. We want out of it. And so they worked really hard. Everyone did for a long time to make that happen. And salmon will be flowing up the river again, migrating up. It's almost too hard to describe. Like the strength of it, because it's not just Yurok, it's Karuk up the river, It's the Klamath tribes at the very top of the basin. We'll see salmon in their water for the first time in 100 years.
Wow.
Yeah, and so then you go over to the Colorado, which we don't have salmon, right? It'd be nice if we did, but we don't, right? That's just not a thing we do have. So our fish are kind of, they play a different role. They're not as a central part of our story. So the dams, and we have a lot of dams in the Colorado. They generate hydro. Hydro is largely used to basically help them move water around the basin, right? I mean, I don't know enough about it to say that it goes to the houses or does this or does that, but I know a lot of it's used to actually pump water up into California, right, from Lake Mead, south of Las Vegas. So those dams are operated very differently and have a different need than the ones on the Klamath River did, because the ones in the Colorado basically maintain a water supply that is so highly variable that without them, people argue that LA would have problems, Phoenix would have problems every year. And because we don't, our lives aren't set up to use what is available. We create dams and things to make sure that it's kind of like an insurance policy. So we've had a lot of talks about whether or not we need all the dams in the basin. I don't know that we do. And so there's a lot more scrutiny on them than there ever has been before. But we hear from the federal government that there's no way we're losing something. So.
Wow. Let's we have to answer a couple more questions. This time I want to go so fast. This has definitely been a fascinating conversation.
Yeah.
I guess I want to nerd out a little bit on litigation, a little bit, and because we're often taught the names of landmark court cases to mark the progression of history. Obviously, Plessy v. Ferguson, Brown v. Board of Education, Loving versus Virginia. So, from your standpoint, obviously you've been in this field now. What are some of the landmark tribal and water rights cases that we should know, and what precedent have they set?
Yeah. Well, I'll zoom just a little further out than that, just to include a couple of really interesting ones. Some of the first cases we had taught are this set of three cases called the Marshall Trilogy, which kind of set the foundation for how tribes, this is in the early 1800s, were going to be viewed, as basically political entities in the United States, right? There was a question, right? We have these tribes. We've made some agreements with them, but does the United States actually have to keep those? And who's in charge on these tribal lands? And because the states didn't have to follow these rules, and Georgia was really bad in the early 1800s, kind of saying, "Oh yeah, basically we have complete control. The treaties really don't matter. We're the ones in charge. We're the state here." But this really important case called Worcester v. Georgia said, you know what? The state has no authority over these tribal lands, right? So you state can't come in there and kind of regulate what's happening on tribal lands. These tribes, this is their land. You got to stay out, and you can't mess with us there. The president at the time, of course, Andrew Jackson, wasn't too happy about that. So, but as we kind of move along, there was some of the important cases in my field. The number one that we is the bedrock for water is Winters v. United States, 1908 decision, basically saying that tribes, when our reservations were created, right, usually through treaties, but it could have been through an executive order, from the president. At that moment, that enough water basically to support those tribal nations into the future was reserved to those tribes. Which means that if you come in and you live upstream of me, a tribal member, and you start taking all the water, and I don't have enough water to do what I need, then what you're doing is illegal, right? We have the first primary right of water use, and so you can't touch that because in that treaty, basically, we have reserved that water right to us. So that was incredibly important. That message, because this was settlement time, right? Everyone was chasing water, they were building things, and You can imagine that if tribes didn't have that, then they wouldn't have any water now, right? 100 plus years later, when we're kind of really developing ourselves as full tribal nations, not just kind of these kind of disempowered political bodies that we were 150 years ago, but now, I mean, it's a really just it's a resource, and it's a case that just is so profound. One other one I'll share, which is related to water, is the Bolt decision, which is US v. Washington, happened 50 years ago in 1974. For these tribes in the Northwest who were all fishing tribes, right? They signed all these treaties that said that they can fish in common with the other citizens of the state, or the state regulation. And the court said that that meant that tribes can take 50% of the annual fish runs in the Northwest, which was profound because it would continue the tribe's ability to be fishing people, and said that they could regulate their fishery. And one of my, a law professor who left us earlier this year, just finished a book on this called Treaty Justice. It's about this case. It was a case that we actually brought here at that Native American Rights Fund. And he thinks it's as important to tribes as Brown v. Board of Education.
Wow.
And it was just really cemented that the strength of a tribal treaty, right? In a time when, as we talked about it, things were kind of unclear about the strength of them. And it basically said, yeah, these treaties continue, they're strong as ever, and they provide these tribal people these important rights. And that was the agreement, and we have to live with it. So, and the last shout out I'll say is Justice Neil Gorsuch has been an incredible person and justice for tribal issues in the last few years of the Supreme Court's term.
Wow, you don't hear that too often.
I know, and he was somebody he was somebody that we supported as an organization, and he has been the leading person on the Supreme Court, like in support of affirming tribal treaty rights. And he writes
that's amazing.
He writes fantastic opinions. He gets it to his core, and he takes a real deep interest in the promises that the United States made tribes, and it's pretty amazing. So yeah, keep an eye out for a Gorsuch opinion now and then on tribes. It's a great.
You heard it here. Listen, you heard it here, right here on the Coolest Show. We definitely gonna keep an eye out for that. I just have one more question.
Yeah.
Thank you for this. This is actually, again, this was a great and such an informative conversation. As of March 2024, groups from the 7 states that depend on the Colorado River have submitted proposals outlining their suggested management plans for the year 2026 and beyond. Maybe you can tell us who those groups involved, who was involved, what was suggested, and then most importantly, this is really my go out here, giving you the free reign question, is that what does this mean for the future of the Colorado River Basin?
So really what's happening in 2026, the current, they call them interim guidelines, are expiring. And they created these rules in 2007 because they realized, hey, guess what? It looks like we're in a drought. We're not having as much water as we thought we'd have. So we got to figure out some different rules to manage how we handle situations where we're running low on water, right? That was kind of that's the set of rules that we're dealing with right now. In 2007, tribes weren't involved in kind of any of this negotiation. They just weren't. They just didn't include them. Feds in the states didn't include them. When we talk about what people want and the proposals is, the Colorado River Basin management-wise is broken up into an upper basin and a lower basin, kind of at more or less at the Utah border, right? And so the lower basin states, Arizona, Nevada, and California primarily, are the ones who have that heavy use of water, right? This includes Mexico. They have a bunch of water, but they have a very different interest in how they want those cuts divided up or management-wise than Colorado and Utah and Wyoming do. Where Colorado we don't depend on reservoir uses so much up here because we're at the headwaters, right? Those lower basin states do. So what they want to do is they want to say, hey, if there's shortages, we all share that shortage the same. It's like basically pro rata. We all share the pain together, right? Whereas the upper basin states, Colorado says like we have to deal with the shortage every year because if it doesn't snow, we don't have water. You guys still get water. We just don't get it, right? Because there's no storage reservoir that helps support our communities, and either we get it from Mother Nature or we don't. So those are really the two primary proposals that we're talking about. The NGOs have set out some ideas too on how they think some of the reservoir management, and what it comes down to is reservoir management, Lake Mead and Lake Powell. And what tribes have tried to do is like tribes haven't had, tribes weren't necessarily involved in this. They've been setting out and thinking about what do we need to be active partners and how do we participate in basin governance and protect our interests the best way. So that's what his long-term vision comes in. What I think about the basin. How do we empower tribes to develop their water rights, like we were talking about? How do we get them infrastructure? A lot of tribes have water rights, but they can't use them yet because they don't have the funding available. And what good is it if I said, here's 50 buckets for your water, but you can't actually have any water, right? That doesn't do you much good. We got to figure out ways to fill the buckets and bring those buckets to the tribal communities. And then letting tribes, if they want to, enter into agreements with people to lease water, right? Or to otherwise help other folks that need water if the tribes have that ability to use it. Flexibility, right? These are things that tribes don't have. And so why don't we make them equal partners, if maybe not, fully strengthen them like we do like we do with states and then other water users. So the vision is let's figure out how these proposals work. Let's also be empowering tribes through ideas and proposal development to be fully empowered for the next, into time on the ability to manage their water.
Wow. How can people follow and support you?
You can. I think we have newsletters at the Native American Rights Fund you can sign up for. That's a great way to do it. We got social media. I will be posting my stuff up on my social media pages to kind of keep up with our work here. So there's, just the normal, kind of now boring traditional ways.
Oh man.
Also, one more. We have,
no, go ahead.
I got an email account for us, water@narf.org, which will be kind of keeping people up to date with our work. Once we start getting newsletters and information out for distribution, we'll be doing it through that. So we're for the front end of what seems to be a really cool, fun project that we hope to be super impactful, and it'll be great for people to kind of keep up to it and help support us.
Oh man, that's real good. Daniel, man, thank you so much for being here with me.
My pleasure, dude. So really cool to see you. Thanks for thinking of me, and thanks for picking up this issue. And whenever you want to come back around, I'm here.
Oh, that's for sure. And that's our guest today, Daniel Cordalis, staff attorney at the Native American Rights Fund. And I am Rev Yearwood, your host of The Coolest Show.